Right, so welcome everyone to the Business Basics for Startups workshop by the Polaris Centre. This is the 9th or 10th time that we've delivered this workshop, and it's fantastic. Thanks for letting me know, Karen and Jen. Thank you for letting me know. This workshop is designed to provide a lot of useful advice to people that are either considering starting up a new business, are in the process of starting a new business, or perhaps have started up a new business in the last 6 months or so. Hopefully they'll get something useful out of it too. My name is Mark Nemstis. I'm actually the Digital Business Advisor at the Polaris Centre, but I'm only here a couple of days a week. The other days of the week, I actually have two small businesses that I run. I run a retail bricks and mortar store, and we have an online software business as well. So I wouldn't say that I'm a serial entrepreneur, but I have paid my way through the world for almost the last 20 years doing this sort of stuff. So I have a little bit of experience in the area. So let's get started about what we're going to cover today. These are all the things that we're going to cover. I try to keep this workshop as practical as possible, and I guess my aim is to provide you with a whole raft of useful advice, but then to also provide you with some counselling as to sort of the enormity of the work that goes into starting a new business and what you need to understand about yourself and about your business and your business idea before you get started. So to make that easier, what I actually do, because I find this sort of exercise useful, is I've actually created a fictitious story of a small business person, and the examples that I give in that fictitious story are either issues that I've had myself in my business, or issues that I've come across multiple times with the 500 or 600 businesses that I've dealt with here at Polaris in the last couple of years. So, these are real issues that people continually have that we'll talk about. And I should just say that you'll probably get this from the story, my passion really is people who are willing to put themselves out there and create jobs for themselves, because I think that, in my opinion, that's the backbone of small business in Australia. People who do create a job for themselves. Something north of 80% of small businesses in Australia are one person. So we help keep the country running, and it's a big risk and it's a lot of work for one person to do this. So my hat goes out to everyone who gives it a go. So why are you going to go into business? You're going to go into business for any number of reasons. And some of those are listed off there. Flexibility, you get to set the rules, you get to set your own deadlines, create your own culture, pursue a passion, create an asset, all those sorts of things. I, for example, started our software business so that I could get a better work-life balance. I could spend some time at home with my young family. I was an engineer before, worked long hours, long days, and I wasn't getting to see them as much as I'd like. So I thought, well, let's have a go at starting a business. And that was my main goal. Our bricks and mortar business is a completely different kettle of fish. We started that for a completely different reason. It's more of a passion for us. So these days, there are lots of people that are creating businesses around some sort of social need. And they aren't necessarily created to develop a profit. They're created to, if you like, change the world or bring some change into the world that their owners have a passion for. So, from my point of view, why you start a business is probably the first question you need to ask yourself. And for some people, if they don't have the passion for it, if they don't have the drive for it, they should probably think about why they're going into business in the first place. What are the goals for your business? So there's some goals listed there. And, as I said, my first business was started for work-life balance reasons, but the ultimate goal of it was to be able to pay my bills for a period of time. And, that proved to be successful. Our bricks and mortar business, while it's a passion for us, really our ultimate goal is to create a saleable asset at some point in the future. So, we're working hard on it and drawing minimal wage out of it, but we're hoping that in 5 to 10 years, it's a significant asset that we can then divest ourselves of and move into retirement. Other people might want to start a business to develop a new product, or to, perhaps they want to employ people. The reasons are many and varied, but again, not only understanding why you're going to start a business, understanding what the ultimate goal of it is an important question you should ask yourself. There's some other personal goals down there. The last one there, a commute, is quite funny. I spent the best part of the years from 2003 to 2018 commuting from my bedroom to the other end of the house, and it was fantastic. And when I started at Polaris a few years ago, the relatively short 15-minute commute each way felt like a lifetime. So, there are people that commute a lot further than that, obviously. And, an hour in the car in the morning and the afternoon is as good a reason as any to perhaps try and free yourself up from that. So we'll just get into the first step of the first chapter of our little story here. Bria Jones has worked in an office for 5 years before having her first child and having a year off of work. Before she had her daughter, she had a market stall once a month selling handmade bath products. She's had amazing feedback from her customers and from her friends and family about the quality of her product. She loves making her bath bombs, sourcing the ingredients and designing new products. She thinks she could probably build a small home-based business from it that allows her to work her own hours and work them around the needs of her young child. She'd like to bring in a decent part-time wage from the business and perhaps start selling her products online. So you can see there what her motivations are. And those sorts of motivations are very common in my experience. I see a lot of people here through Polaris that go into business for reasons that are almost identical to that. I mentioned in the introduction talking about understanding yourself and your capabilities, and the first part of this presentation is primarily about you understanding yourself, your goals, what your capabilities are, and how well you understand your products or services that your business is proposing to deliver to customers. So do you have the financial capability to start a business? There are some businesses that are very cheap to start. There are others that are not. Our software business was started with about $2,000, a computer and some software and desk in the corner and an internet connection. The retail business was started with a lot more than that. A retail business can cost anywhere from $1,000 per square metre upwards to fit out a space. So even for a small 40 square metre shop, you're talking $40,000 to $50,000 just to fit out the space. Do you have the financial capability to do that if that's the business that you're going into? There's a whole bunch of skills there that you might think are not required if you're going into business, but unfortunately you're going to find that it is. Most small business people that I know are sort of broad topic experts in a lot of things because they just need to be. You need to know how to manage people. You're going to need to have technical skills to keep the business running day to day, basic finance and accounting skills. You're going to want to learn some bookkeeping. You're going to need some relevant industry experience. It's very difficult to get into an industry that you don't have experience in. You're going to need a bit of legal expertise, a bit of marketing expertise, administration, customer service, project management. What's project management? Project management is setting yourself a goal in 12 months' time and breaking down the tasks that you need to accomplish that and all the resources that you need, and then making sure that you follow that through to completion. For a lot of people that come out of the workforce, a long-term project is 2 days or 3 days. It's quite feasible in small business for a project to run for a year or 18 months or 2 years. And that's a real mindset change for some people to be thinking that long-term. If you are going to go into business and you've done a little bit of a skills audit and there's some of the skills that you're going to need there, do you have them all? If you're in a partnership, does your partner have some of the ones that you don't have? If you don't have some of them, how are you going to get them? You're going to train, you're going to outsource, you're going to employ someone, you're going to find another partner. There's different ways that you can get these skills. So, you know, in our case, we use an insurance broker, we use a lawyer, we use an accountant. We should be using a bookkeeper, but we don't. You know, there's a whole range of experts that we now employ to do this stuff for us. Yes, it costs money, but the value that those people bring with their expertise outweighs the cost. You need to work out where the skills are going to come from. Okay. So Bria's got several $1,000s saved up that she could put towards a business. She's confident that this would be enough to get her up and running. She's fairly certain that a website for a business is likely to be her biggest upfront cost. But she has a friend who says that he can set up an e-commerce site for her fairly inexpensively. Her past experience running the market stall means she has a good idea of how much her inventory costs. She has a spare room in her house that she could run the business from. So having space to run a business is something that people don't think about. Okay, you need space for inventory. You need space to do your paperwork. You need space to process your orders. So in her previous job, Bria was in charge of accounts payable and she's got a certificate in bookkeeping. So she's not worried about the bookkeeping side of things. Right now, she has no real idea whether she's allowed to run a business from her house. She's got no real idea of any of the legal requirements about running a business. And she understands that. She's not quite sure where the gaps in her knowledge are, but she understands that there are gaps. So what she's doing is she's reaching out to business centres, to government departments, to local business groups to try and figure out all this information that she needs to know and think about where she's going to get it from. Running a small business will put demands on you that you probably won't expect. It's difficult to, in the early stages at least, to separate your business life and your work life. So there are time management issues that are going to be put upon yourself in ways perhaps that you haven't experienced before. And it's not just time management about getting business things done. It's about maintaining your personal relationships. We often will swing too far towards the business side of things, and sometimes your personal relationships will suffer and inevitable conflicts will happen because of that. It's good to anticipate that, and it's good to recognise when they're happening and think about how you're going to address them. On the business side of things, you've got to make sure though that you still get things done. I said that I started my first business to watch my kids grow up, a continual challenge, and it is still to this day, and my son is almost 18 now, so we're talking quite a few years later, is trying to get your children and even sometimes your spouse to recognise when you're working and to allow you to get some things done, because you know, if you are working from home, and a lot of us are, that separation of personal time from work time can be a challenge. What are you going to do when things go wrong? My poor wife has had to listen so many times when things go wrong, and I wish that I had a mentor or a coach like someone from the Polaris Centre to dump that onto over the years. She would have probably preferred that as well. So how are you going to cope when things go wrong? Who are you going to turn to for assistance, and where are you going to find the help? If I had one of the biggest regrets that I've got in my small business, the software business, was that I didn't reach out to a centre like the Polaris Centre or any of the other business advisory services that are around the place, just to have someone to talk to, have someone else that was in business to talk to. So Bria has done fairly well running her business on the weekends and managing her full-time job. However, she's aware that with a new baby in the house, it's going to be tough to give the business the time that it deserves. Because of this, she's been talking to her mother about taking care of her daughter a few afternoons a week so she can get some time to get things done. The further worry to it is that for the first time, really, and this is something that perhaps if you've been employed before that a lot of people don't understand, is that everything falls on your shoulders. So she's going to be responsible for all the postage, all the bookkeeping, all the product development, all of the shipping, all of the bookkeeping, you know, everything from go to woe. She, for the first time, is going to be responsible for that. To try and work around that, she's decided to develop a little time plan for herself and to make sure that everything gets done. We as small business people that go into business with passion, we tend to gravitate towards the things that we're passionate about and ignore the things that we're not. So having a little plan to make sure that you get the things done that you perhaps don't enjoy as much is super important. It's something I've done myself. It's something that a lot of business people I know do themselves, and it does help you keep getting things done. So at this point, Bria is pushing on, assuming she's going to succeed. What she hasn't thought about is what's going to happen if things go wrong, perhaps a series of customer complaints or a missed inventory delivery or customers that fail to pay. Or what if she just doesn't have enough time to get things done? How is she going to deal with that? What if she just simply doesn't have enough time to get things done? Even though she's thought about that, she's still not really fully aware about the fact that for the first time, really, everything is going to fall on her shoulders. If something goes wrong, she's not going to go home and come back in the morning and someone will have solved it, or she hasn't got a higher level of management to turn to or a colleague to turn to. It's really all on her shoulders. So we know what skills the business is going to require. We know where we're going to get those from. We're going to, employ someone or train ourselves or get a partner or whatever that happens to be. We understand what our goals are. We're starting to get a good idea of how we're going to work within this business. So now what you need to understand is what actually is your product, what is your service, what is it that your business does. The classic business advisor story that we have for this is what does, when you go and buy a 10 millimeter drill bit, what are you getting? What is the benefit that 10 millimeter drill bit gives you? And the business advisor answer is that, the benefit it gives you is 10 millimeter holes. So the people that make drill bits aren't really necessarily selling drill bits. They're selling the ability to make your own 10 millimeter holes. So, what's the takeaway from that? The takeaway is, do you really understand what it is, the benefit that your product or service gives your customers? Because until you understand that, you don't really understand what your product is. You don't understand how to sell it, and you don't understand what your customers' motivations are to actually buy it. So it's an important distinction for you to make. Is your idea feasible? So do you have the money to buy the inventory? Do you have the money to develop the product? Is it scientifically possible? I spent 4 years working for an engineering company, and we would have inventors coming into the engineering company several times a year with scientifically impossible products, and it was my job to explain to them why you can't change the laws of physics. So is your idea actually possible? Do you have the expertise? Can you ever have the expertise? I'm not going to go and start a medical practice. Okay, it's just impossible. Will your idea work, and should you proceed with it? And this is the time where you need to be sort of brutally honest with yourself. The story I like to tell is I had one client in here, and they resold cardboard pizza boxes, and they had some goals about how much they wanted to earn out of the business, but at no point had they ever asked themselves what their gross profit was and how many of these things they needed to sell to reach their financial goals. And the disappointing thing to me was that none of the consultants they had spoken to had asked them the same question. And I still feel upset to this day when I think about the reaction they had in the room with me when we worked out that they had to sell 950,000 pizza boxes a year in Adelaide, 2 people in one van, to meet their financial goals. And it was impossible. And those poor people had spent $50,000 or $60,000 on websites and sign writing and vehicles and all those sorts of things up until that point. And if they had just asked themselves at these beginning stages, is this feasible? They wouldn't have spent that money, and then perhaps they could have found another idea. Is your idea different and valuable? You know, is reselling pizza boxes different and valuable? No, not really. It's a commodity product. So, you know, they needed to do something different. And do you know what your elevator pitch is? So your elevator pitch is your ability to convey to your potential customers what your product is, how it is different and valuable, and how it's going to change someone's life in the time it takes to ride from the 10th floor of a building to the ground floor of a building. That's the elevator pitch. Okay. So if you ever come in here and see me, one of the first questions I ask everyone is, you know, tell me what your product is, tell me what your service is. And you'll probably see me get fairly impatient if you're still talking after 30 seconds, because if you can't convey to me in 30 seconds what it is that you're proposing to do and how it's going to impact people's lives, then you kind of need to go away and think about it a bit more. So Bria knows what her product is. It's handmade bath bombs made from cruelty-free ingredients. She understands that while she is selling physical bath bombs, what she's really selling is a relaxation and uplifting experience to her customers. Okay, she's making people feel better when they have a bath. That's effectively what she's doing. Right now, she knows there's no physical reasons why she couldn't run a bath bomb business out of the spare room of her house. She knows how much her products cost to make. She knows where to source the ingredients. She knows how to develop new products. What she doesn't have any experience with is e-commerce, but hey, people sell stuff online these days. She knows it's not an insurmountable problem. She knows it can be done. It can be done. You can take payments. You can send stuff through the mail. You can package stuff. Okay, it's not an insurmountable problem. What does concern her is whether she's actually allowed to run the business from her house. Okay, so for her, that's what's bugging her. Now, if you run a food business and you want to run it from your house, that's something that you should be concerned with, okay, about whether you're actually allowed to. And if you are allowed to, what hygiene requirements do you have to meet to do so? Okay, these are the sorts of things you should be asking yourself. So we know ourselves, we know our goals, we now know our product. Do we know our market? And our market is that group of people that may potentially pay us for our goods or services. They are also our competitors. They are also other products in our market. So do you know who your competitors are, where they are, what do they charge, how do they sell their products, how do they deliver their products, how much do their products cost, what are they going to be able to do better than you, what are you going to be able to do better than them? Do you know who your customers are? Do you know where they are? Do you know how old they are? Do you know what gender they are? Do you know how much they earn? Do you know where they live? Do you know what social media channels they use? What actually motivates them to purchase your product? So, you know, the motivation to reach out to a plumber is very different to the motivation to reach out to a florist. Okay, when am I going to look for a plumber versus when am I going to look for a florist? The buying behavior is completely different. Okay, and you think about it, the Google search behavior is probably completely different too. How much are they willing to pay for your products and how are they going to buy? Okay, are they going to hand you cash? Are they going to come into a shop? Are they going to buy online? What's that mechanism to get their money into your bank account? So Bria knows her market really well. She knows what other handmade products in her industry sell for, and she knows what the mass-produced items cost. She knows she's got a good idea of who her potential customers are in terms of gender and age, and you know, and what motivates them to purchase those products. Why some people are willing to pay X for a handmade product and willing to pay Y for a mass-produced product. What she doesn't know at this point is how much it costs to ship items. She doesn't know how competitive she's going to be in that area versus the bigger players in her field. And she doesn't know the method that they ship things with. She doesn't understand people's expectations in terms of payment methods, in terms of shipping times and all those sorts of things. So she's going to have to go away and do some research in that area, put them all in a nice little table and compare them to what she thinks that she can do. So this is the first checklist that we've got here. And this is really just understanding yourself and understanding your product and understanding your market and so on. Now, I've tacked on the end there about the business plan. Lots of business startup courses sort of get involved in the business plan a lot. I hardly touch on it at all here. And I think that's because it's really a subject that's worthy of an entire workshop by itself. We will email you a business plan template along with a copy of the presentation. Now, it's a really good template because it is all partially filled out with a theoretical business story. So you can kind of take inspiration from that. It's one of the better business plan templates that I've seen. That being said, it is still quite lengthy, and I am a bit of an advocate for the 1 or 2 page business plan if you can get away with it. So what is a business plan? Well, there it is there. And there's some reasons up the top about why you would actually want one. They can help you, assist you in getting finance or grants. You're not going to get a loan or a line of credit or a government grant if you don't have a business plan. As a document inside your business, they can help you set goals and set directions for yourself. Now, that means that the business plan isn't just something that you write at the beginning and then stick it on the shelf and forget about it. It's something that you go back and examine every year, ideally, or every 3 months, and see what goals you have met, see what goals you're obviously not going to meet, change it. I mean, this is just basic planning. It allows you to step back and see what's working and what's not. So, your business plan might include some marketing objectives and marketing is one of these things that it can be experimental, that you might throw $10,000 into social media advertising and define some return on investment measures for it. And then after 6 months, evaluate that and find out that it doesn't work and change your marketing mix and your business plan to account for that. So what is it? It's a summary of your business, includes details about your business, including the business structure, any licensing and registrations that you might need, where the business is, what products and services you offer. It includes the marketing plan, which is an analysis of the market and the potential market, and a SWOT analysis and what your targets are, what strategies you're going to approach, what mix you're going to use. The business plan will include goals and milestones, and then it'll include all the financial stuff that banks and government departments and things like that are going to want to see. But if you're smart, you'll use those numbers to actually help drive the direction of your business too. So just before we go on to the next part, does anyone have any questions, or are we all good at the moment? No, all good? Okay, thanks, Tim. So this is the second checklist: business structure, compliance and licensing, intellectual property, insurance, finance, accounting and record keeping. So these are the things that we'll cover in the second part of the presentation. So business structure, this is the legal structure for your business. And there's effectively 4 structures. Well, there's some more, but these are the 4 most common structures that businesses will adopt here in Australia. The most common one is sole trader. And why is it the most common one? Because it costs nothing. You can register. You don't have to register as a sole trader. You can start trading under your very own name as a sole trader without having to register for anything if you wish. If you want to operate under a business name, so what I mean by operating under my own name, if I want to set up a consulting service and I just called myself Mark Nemstis, then I can trade without having to register a business name as a sole trader. If I want to set myself up as Mark Nemstis Consulting, then I need to register a business name, and that really is the only registration that is needed as a sole trader. As your turnover increases, you'll need to register for an ABN and then register for GST and all that sort of stuff. So, the complexity to set up as a sole trader is low. The cost is low because effectively, really all you need is a business name, and that's only $80 odd for 3 years. There's no legal requirements in terms of agreements or shareholdings or contracts or anything like that. The tax, the year of end tax is reasonably simple. And why is it simple? Because as a sole trader, there is no distinction made between your business assets and business expenses and business sales and your own personal income tax. So effectively the business return is your return. So that makes that all quite simple. The last thing there, which you can see is liability. For a sole trader, the liability of is unlimited. And what's liability? Liability is the idea that if your business racks up liabilities or debts, then again, there's no distinction made between your assets and the business assets. So if you were to buy $500,000 in inventory and then there was a huge downturn in the market and you couldn't pay the bill for the $500,000 in inventory, then your creditors could indeed come after your house and property. So the liability is unlimited. So the next structure that we will commonly see is a partnership, and a partnership is an agreement between two or more people to work in partnership with each other. And the complexity is slightly more than a sole trader because you need some sort of binding agreement between the partners about the shareholding of the partnership. The cost is a little bit higher because generally you'll want to go to a lawyer to get that agreement drawn up. The tax implications are low because if I'm a 50% shareholder and you're a 50% shareholder, then 50% of the income and expenses are allocated to my income tax return, and 50% of the income and expenses are allocated to your income tax return because, again, we haven't created a legal entity for ourselves. We're just two people working effectively as two sole traders, if you like. And again, with a partnership, the liability is indeed unlimited, but with the added bonus that if your partner racks up debts, you are personally liable for them. So, that's something to be aware of with a partnership. The third one here is the one probably that we're all most familiar with, and that's setting up a company. The complexity is high. A company is its own legal entity. Okay, it's its own thing under Australian law. So as a consequence, there are a whole pile of binding agreements that need to be drawn up for the company. That being said, the process for setting up a company in the last 15 years has become much easier. You can now register a company in an hour via various websites, and they will email you all of the documents that you need to sign, and then they will email them back to them and they will get submitted to ASIC, and all that sort of stuff is taken care of for you. The cost is reasonably high, but you can set up a company in Australia for under $1,000. So it's not an overwhelming impost. And obviously the legal costs are high because of that. There are shareholder agreements and things like that. And getting into the company is complicated. Getting out of the company is complicated as well. So removing shareholders and adding shareholders is complex. It is a legal process. Tax requirements are moderate because in the case of a company, it's its own legal entity and it does its own tax return. Okay, so everything in the company is legally separated from you. There's an added bit of complexity with a company is how are you paid? And a company either pays you with dividends or as a wage. So it is more complicated paying yourself, The big bonus of a company is one, if your company is doing really well, then company tax rate is lower than personal tax rate. It can be lower, but the liability is limited. So that PTY LTD at the end of a company is proprietary limited liability. So there is a separation between the company assets and liabilities are debts, by the way, and your personal assets. So given that you trade in good faith inside a company, then and it racks up debts, then you are limited in liability. Now, that's not a get out of jail free card. You can still be liable if you're trading when insolvent or, under various other circumstances, legal things that are outside of the scope of this workshop. It's not a get out of jail free card. So the last structure there that I'm not going to cover is a trust, a family trust, or a discretionary trust. It's a slightly different way of doing things. It's a different way of distributing income around multiple people. They're much less useful than what they used to be. If you want to know what a discretionary trust is, find a good accountant and talk to them, and they may well be able to explain to you why it will be useful to you. So Bria spoke to an accountant friend, and he asked her how much she expected to earn, whether she wanted to spend the money the business earned or retain it to grow the business. So, as I said, a proprietary limited company pays tax on profits at the corporate tax rate, and the highest marginal tax rate is quite a bit higher than that. So in some cases, it's best to hold the money in the business and use it to grow the business rather than drawing it all out and spending it as income. Bria wants to spend her money because she doesn't expect to earn that much. So the accountant said, well, let's just stick it being a sole trader. That's going to be the easiest thing for her at the moment. Bria's happy to do that because it means that she can do her own tax, and the startup costs for a business are likely to be a lot lower. I should just say that if you do have a company, you have to pay for two tax returns, the company's tax return and yours. If there's two shareholders, then you've got to pay for the company and the two shareholders as well. Now, that can run into sort of $1,000 or $2,000 a year, depending on how complex things are for you. Compliance and licensing. There's a really good website there called the Australian Business License and Information Service, and the URL is there, and I'll include that in the email tomorrow. It is a interactive survey that asks you about where you're going to conduct business, what sort of products you're going to create, how you're going to deliver them, how you're going to store them, and all that sort of stuff. And it gives you a really good list of all the federal, state and council laws that you're going to have to comply with. And it also gives you a really good idea about the sorts of standards that you're probably going to have to comply with. So weights and measure standards, food hygiene practices and things like that. So, for example, the City of Salisbury, which is where Polaris is, has different signage allowances for home-based businesses compared to the City of Tea Tree Gully where I live. And it's a fine distinction, but in Tea Tree Gully you can't have a sign, and in Salisbury you can have a sign. I believe that was the case the last time I looked. There's different allowances in different councils for footpath signage. There's different allowances in different councils about home food businesses and food vans and things like that. So this ablis.business.gov.au is a great place to check out what it is that you're going to have to do. If you package food, it will tell you what packaging standards and weights and measure standards you're going to have to comply with. So, if a package weighs 500 grams, how close to 500 grams do you need to be? What are the requirements on the labels? Product of Australia, made in Australia, ingredients used, all that sort of stuff. It's a really neat resource, which is unusual for a government website. It's really good. So Bria contacted her local council to ask about running a home-based business. They said she could only have one tiny external sign for a business, and no retail customers were allowed on her premises, nor could she put any waste into her home drains. So why don't councils want you running busy businesses from domestic houses? Because, those areas aren't zoned for business, they're zoned for residential, and having continual vehicles and truck deliveries and things like that is going to disturb people's quality of life. The council also had some rules about the number of deliveries she could accept each day. After a visit to the ABLIS website, she found there was no particular licensing requirements she had to meet. She does have a great idea of what she has to put on her product labels though. So, what do you mean by licensing requirements? You can't just set yourself up as a doctor or a dentist or a financial advisor or a financial institution or any of that sort of stuff. There are requirements around licensing and accreditation and qualifications that you need for all those sorts of things. And this website will give you a great idea of those sorts of stuff. Business names, do you need one? If you're trading as Joe Smith, no. If you're trading as Joe Smith Plumbing, yes. You need an ABN to register a business name. So if you're going to get a business name, you need an ABN first. It's effectively a trading name. So that means that you, as a sole trader, you can have multiple business names registered and you own all of those, and they're all trading names. So, you know, Joe Smith Plumbing, Joe Smith Building Maintenance, Joe Smith Electrical, they're all business names, they're all trading names. Business names can be owned by proprietary limited companies. So if you were to start up Joe Smith Plumbing Proprietary Limited, it could own all these various different business names and trade as each one of those. There's a link there as to how to register for a business name. There's a great business name checking tool there that also will allow you to see if your domain name is available and what extensions on the domain names are available. And it's $84 for 3 years. You'd be amazed at how many people are trading as something that don't have a business name registered. I'm amazed how many people do. So Bria realises she was doing the wrong thing by selling her bath bombs as Bria's Blissful Bath Bombs at her market stall. So now she's just going to go and register a business name. So interestingly, we'll cover off in a second about whether the registration as a registration of a business name gives you sole use to use that business name. So, and the answer is easily enough, no, it doesn't. The business name doesn't give you exclusive rights to use the name. So how do you get exclusive rights to use a name? You need a trademark. And the story that I like to tell here is about a New South Wales based swimwear business called Absolute Swimwear, and Absolute was spelled A-B-S-O-L-U-T, and they traded through the mid-90s, the late 90s and the early 2000s, and in the early 2000s they were contacted by lawyers from Absolute Vodka, and it turned out that Absolute Vodka had registered trademarks in, and it's important to understand here that trademarks are issued across product classes. So clothing, food, beverages. Absolute Vodka had registered the Absolute trademark across all the classes in Australia, as many classes as they could. And because they produce merchandise and all that sort of stuff. So it's a valid trademark. Now, they contacted Absolute Swimwear and asked them to cease using the name and asked for hefty damages to be paid. The case was taken to arbitration and the claim for damages was dropped, but the Absolute Swimwear had to change their business name. So they rebranded all their stores. They had half a dozen stores through New South Wales, and they went broke because all that brand awareness that they had built up over the years was lost. Which is unfortunate. And, you know, don't think that you can get away with leveraging off of other people's brands, because a lot of these big corporates now have departments that are always scanning for usage of their brands. Okay, the internet makes it easy to look for this sort of stuff. So be careful about what you use. Right, so how do you protect your business name? You protect it with a trademark. And as I said, a trademark is across different classes. So, you know, if you're an engineering company and you're going to be Joe Smith Engineering, then there'll be a class that applies to that. So you apply for a trademark at ipaustralia.gov.au. It costs about $420 or something like that. And you are not guaranteed to be assigned the trademark. So, you know, how do you mitigate the risk of losing that $420 if you're not assigned? You get do some research first. If you're not really sure what research to conduct, you can go and contact an intellectual property lawyer, and they'll do the research for you and give you an opinion on whether the trademark might be assigned or not. Often these IP lawyers will offer 15 minutes or 20 minutes of free advice, and they may well tell you what databases to go and search. Alternatively, there is this TM Head Start process, which is a two-step application process. It's more than the $440, but it's in 2 stages. So you pay sort of a smaller upfront fee, and then the IP Australia will give you an opinion about whether the trademark is likely to be assigned or not, and then if they believe it will, then you pay the second part of the fee, and hopefully you get the trademark assigned. There's still no guarantees though. So that's trademarks. Encourage you to go and look at IP Australia. There's different types of intellectual property protection outside of trademarks. There's design marks and obviously patents and things like that, depending on what sort of product that you're producing. So Bria went to a business startup workshop and was confused when the presenter was talking about intellectual property and trademarks. She's been reading some FAQs on the IP Australia website and doesn't really like the idea that someone might be able to sell their bath bombs using her business name. She's decided that she'd like to to apply for a trademark, and has decided to do so using the TM Head Start process. Now, I don't necessarily always think that trademarking your business name is worthwhile. If your goal is to produce a small income over a short period of years, then perhaps you don't need to worry about it. If you plan on creating a brand that you are going to on-sell or perhaps grow to a large company, then I think you should absolutely think about trademarking your brands. And I should just say that you don't have to just trademark a business name. You can trademark product names and things like that. There's all sorts of rules about what you can and can't trademark. I, for one, don't understand how Apple managed to trademark Apple because it's a general use term. But that's a legal issue that you might have a bit of fun working out yourself. My all-time favourite topic, insurance. You either have a set of requirements on you that require you to compulsorily purchase insurance to do business, or there are optional requirements to have insurance to do business. So, compulsory insurance includes public liability, workers' compensation, third-party personal injury, stuff like that. We recently started paying my wife a wage, and as such now we have to pay compulsory workers' compensation insurance inside our business for the first time ever, which is super fun. On a personal level, you might want to think about income protection insurance, life insurance, total permanent disablement, business interruption. So business interruption, if there is a fire or a flood or something like that, you can claim off of that. Income protection, if you're the sole earner, then perhaps that can be thought about, but these things are a bit of a cost benefit. The age that I am now, TPD and life insurance is getting pretty expensive. So, it's something that we're considering dropping for us. You need to think about the insurance on the assets of the business, building and contents, burglary, stock deterioration, electronic equipment failure, liability insurance. So, what if something goes wrong? Public liability, product liability, professional indemnity. So, public liability might be if you have physical premises that you're operating from. It might be if you're at a market. So, it seems odd that you might need public liability insurance at a market, but try booking a stall at a market and not having some sort of public liability insurance. They don't want to know you. Okay, they don't want to know you. If you try to book a public facility for an event and you don't have public liability insurance, you're not going to get anywhere. Product liability insurance. Now that's if your product does harm to someone in the normal use of it. Now, and that's not just physical harm, it's mental harm as well. So it seems very risky to be pushing a product out there that and not having that sort of liability insurance. Back when I was doing engineering consulting, I had professional indemnity insurance. To the best of my abilities, I always did the best job that I could, but there was no telling what could go wrong, perhaps a failure in materials or that was outside of my control. And I always wanted to be careful that myself and my family were covered in those cases. Excuse me. So the last point there is use an insurance broker. This is a good opportunity to not have to be an expert at everything. If you were to ring around insurance brokers, and these aren't insurance companies, these are insurance brokers. They act as the intermediaries between the insurance companies and you. If you were to ring an insurance broker and tell them what type of business you are, they will give you a great idea of what sort of insurance it is that you're likely to require. Okay. Now, 2 bits of advice are the insurance quotes that you get through insurance brokers will generally be higher than the quotes you get directly from the companies. So the second bit of advice is don't take the first offer. They will generally come down if you haggle with them or complain. Okay, so you know, don't just pay what you're told. Have a whinge about it, and you'll generally get it cheaper. But you know, do use an insurance broker. They do offer a fairly valuable service, and you know, ring up the call centres of an insurance company like a CGU or something, and telling them what sort of business you're in is going to be an exercise in frustration. So Bria has spoken to an insurance broker. He suggested that she think about income protection insurance, but that was expensive and the business wasn't making anything yet. He did suggest that she get product liability insurance, and another great suggestion that he had was to look for a home-based business insurance policy, as sometimes these included product liability as well as covering her for loss of inventory in the case of fire and disaster. Now, why do I bring up that point? It's because your home insurance policy, the contents policy, almost certainly doesn't cover the inventory and equipment you use to carry out business. They're almost always excluded from home-based insurance policies. And similarly, if you're using your vehicle for business purposes, that's almost certainly excluded from your car insurance as well. So you just need to think about that, about what you're going to do about that. Now, as I said there are home-based business insurance policies that are specifically designed to cover home-based businesses, and they include product liability in their policies. Similarly, there are market stall-based insurance policies that you can get that, you can buy them for one event, and you can buy them for the whole 12 months, and they'll include public liability and product liability and various other things that will help you out. So there are products designed specifically for small businesses like ours. Another favourite topic of mine is finance. So, and this is something that a lot of businesses fall apart on, is setting up payment systems, invoicing, billing, tracking debtors and things like that. And if anyone here is in trades are generally terrible at this. They're in it to do the work, not necessarily to get paid. Well, they want to get paid, but they don't generally like chasing up bills and things like that. So you need to set yourself up with your payment terms, payment types. There's a lot of great apps now that can handle a lot of this for you, and they integrate with online accounting systems like Xero and MYOB. You need to make sure that your systems are compliant with the tax office. I hope you all know what a tax office compliant tax invoice looks like, that you have a requirement to produce one within 14 days of a sale and so on. What are you going to do if you don't get paid? There are lowish cost recovery agencies around that can chase these things up for you. Often the sole trader's partner will be responsible for this. That must be a terrible job. Are you going to make account for your tax that you're going to have to pay? And lots of people that get started up creating a job for themselves as a sole trader neglect this, and you need to know that the profits aren't all yours. So, it might be happy days and things are going really well, but at some point you need to pay the tax on those things. So for us, we have a separate bank account, and as we get income through the year, we put away a set percentage into that bank account to account for our end of year tax bill or our quarterly tax installments. So have got into trouble doing that once, about not doing that about 15 years ago, never going to do it again. So I do advise that you, number one, have a bank account for the business. Okay, so even though as a sole trader, there's no financial distinction between your income and expenses and the businesses, it doesn't mean that you can't have a business bank account. Work out of the business bank account. Don't use it like your own bank account. Just use it for business purposes. For tax installments, think about some sort of high interest savings account where you can put allocations for tax away, because it ain't your money. All right, just be careful of that. The tax office has, and this is dated, a bit dated, this information, because they don't do workshops at the moment because of COVID, but they have about 35 different small tax workshops that they are conducting online. And you can go to that URL there and they will cover things like tax installments, business activity statements, accounting for GST, how to collect GST, how to report on it, all of that sort of stuff. They are well worth going to. This is one of these skills that as a business owner, you never want to have, but you are going to have. You need to understand how this works to get it right, okay? Look, I'll tell you, none of it's very hard. None of it's particularly complicated. It's just a process that you need to follow. And the sooner you get those processes set up, the better. So Bria plans to only accept payment online or cash at her market stall. She's planning on opening a new bank account specifically for the business, and she'll link this to her online payment systems. She'll get a receipt book from a local office supplies company printed with a new business name and ABN to be able to give customers at her market stall a receipt. Her Shopify site, that's her e-commerce website, is going to handle all the invoicing and receipting automatically. And while she's fairly sure she knows how to handle her personal tax and business expenses, she's going to attend some of these ATO workshops online anyway. She's also going to talk to an accountant to find out whether any of her household expenses might be deductible for the business. And absolutely, that is the case in a lot of cases. So if you are operating a home-based business, some of the expenses are deductible. Some of you might be aware that the ATO implemented a simplified daily deduction rate that you can do now. So it is well worth going to talk to an accountant about that when you're getting set up. Why is accounting and record keeping important? Allows you to monitor the health of your business, make sound business decisions, keep track of your debtors and creditors, manage your cash flow, obtain finance from lenders, helps you when it comes time to sell the business, and if you are briefing an accountant when it comes to tax time. So what I mean by monitoring the health of your business: how many assets have you got? How many liabilities have you got? Have you got enough cash on hand to meet upcoming expenditure requirements? Do you have enough cash on hand to deliver your marketing plan that you have so carefully worked out? Make sound business decisions. What does that mean? It means, and I'll give you the example here of our business, and we run a coin and banknote business. It's online and bricks and mortar store. And we have a limited amount of working capital. When we got started, it was very limited, and as such, because we buy and sell, if we, for example, bought a huge collection and tapped out our bank account, then because we're distributors for several wholesalers, if they had new product releases, we didn't have the money to pay the bills, and we didn't get any terms either. So it was cash up front. So, having us keeping up to date with our records meant that we knew when we could and couldn't purchase new releases. Okay, and it was super important for us to do that because we didn't want to get caught out. We didn't want to order things and not be able to pay for it. So we were keeping track of where we were at financially. And we developed simple paper-based systems inside the shop to keep track of that. And we still do it to this day, even though we're in a much better position now. We still follow those same systems. So, what does that mean? It means that, I can tell you last week what we purchased and what we sold and what the bank account balance was at the start of the week and what it was at the end of the week and what bills we had due before the end of the month. So I can tell you all of that. And that's the kind of level of information that you're going to want to know. So Bria has used Xero in her personal job and is planning to do exactly the same thing in her new business. She'll use Xero to track the money in and the money out, value of the inventory that she has on hand. While she's fairly sure she can do her own tax, she knows that the reports from Xero could be given to an accountant to do tax for her. And that's what we do. We do all of our bookkeeping in MYOB. And at the end of the financial year, we run 2 reports for our accountant and email him the data file, and then ship him off a box full of paperwork so he can make sure that we're keeping all the paperwork that we need to, and he does our tax from that. And you know, while that means that there's a burden on us to keep up to date with the bookkeeping, it means that our accountancy fees are fairly low because he doesn't have to do it for us. So what do you need to do before you open? There are startup costs, and we will email you a startup cost template. Are you going to work from home? You're going to buy or lease premises? What sort of systems and procedures do you need to actually do business? Do you need an EFTPOS machine? How much is that going to cost per month, and what's the fees per month for that? Startup costs, there's a list of possible startup costs there. I won't read them all out. The template that I email you has got a great list of possible costs that you've got in there. I used the template when we set up our shop, and you know, it came out within 10% or so. So it was pretty helpful for us. We always, you know, we had a set amount of capital that we could spend as we were setting up, and you know, we had to monitor that fairly closely. We used it, the startup spreadsheet, as a live document. We'd adjust it as new quotes came in and new fees popped up and things like that. So, you know, I won't read out all of those things there, but just be aware that, you know, for some business types, they can be pretty steep. I mentioned with retail, it's $1,000 a square metre to fit out a shop. If you're considering a franchise, then there's usually a pretty hefty upfront fee for those. And, you know, that second to last point there about working capital is there's no point spending all your money on a pretty fit out and then not having money for inventory. So you need to think about that working capital. And working capital is that pool of money that you're going to use to pay your wages and pay bills and things like that, to sort of smooth out things, because not all the money comes in and goes out at the same time. That working capital is required just to keep the business ticking over. So Bria has downloaded the business startup cost spreadsheet from the business.gov.au website, and that's the one that we're going to send you. And she's filled it out. So this suggests that she can set up a business for a couple of $1,000s less than what she has saved up, and it leaves her some working capital to spend on advertising and other sorts of marketing. We're going to work from home. It's cheap. Cheap, just a corner somewhere, and a computer and internet connection is, for a lot of people, is all they need to get started. You need to check whether you're allowed to conduct your sort of business with your local council, and we talked about the ABLIS website earlier. That's how you can work that out. As I've already mentioned, often business assets and inventory isn't covered by your home insurance. There are problems that come along with it. It can be super isolating and distracting. I did it for a long time, and I used to really enjoy it. And after 2 years of working here, and when COVID hit, I had to go home. We worked from home for about 6 weeks, and I've got to tell you, it was a huge adjustment to go back and work from home again. It was really tough. So, you know, it's hard being at home by yourself, and it can be really distracting. So, you know, you'll find yourself mowing the lawn at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or doing the dishes at 9 o'clock in the morning, or something like that, instead of working, just because it's there. And sometimes it's a more attractive thing to do. So how do you get around that? You go along to workshops like this, if possible. Just getting some contact with some other people and seeing another face can be helpful. When we're allowed to do things face to face, going to networking events and face to face workshops can be a really good and valuable exercise. I am so much better now in our business because of the contact I get every day with people through this job at Polaris. Okay, it's made me a better business person just by all the social contact and having other professional people, other business people to bounce ideas off of. It has improved me greatly, and I can't emphasize enough how important it is that you get out and do that. The last point there is get a coach or a mentor. Now, you know, whether that's a paid coach or a paid mentor, or whether it's not, it doesn't actually matter that much. I did some work with a business in Lobethal, and two businesses. The one business I did work with, I worked with her for a couple of years, and there was another business across the road, and I encouraged them to get together once a month and talk to each other and just talk about what's going on in their businesses, what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish. And 2 years later, that's what they do. They meet once a month and they mentor each other. Okay, and they both benefit from it. That means that they can both sort of step out of the craziness of their businesses and, you know, get some perspective and some advice from people that aren't emotionally attached to what's going on. So those sorts of things can be super valuable. So Bria knows that working from home is going to be the cheapest way to get started. She's already spoken to the council, knows they're fine with it, and her insurance broker has found her a great home-based business insurance policy. What she is worried about is making sure she has time to make her products and get them in the mail each day and spend time with her new child. Only time will tell how she'll manage that. She's found a local women's business network. So, you know, ladies, this is the time has never been better to get into the business area. There are women's business networks popping up everywhere. While they're not necessarily meeting face-to-face these days, there are a lot of online events. There's a lot of support networks. There's a lot of women's business groups on Facebook. There is a lot of support for you out there. So, you know, get involved, get talking, get out there. Bria's also on the mailing list of a local business enterprise centre, and their regular workshops look interesting. So she'll try and head along to those. We have workshops 4 or 5 a month. At the moment, they're all free. You know, go along to as many as you can and you might learn something from each one. You know, lease premises. There's some requirements around leasing premises. Leasing premises is a fairly specialised field. Have done it a few times before. There's a few things to look out for there. So there is a reasonably lengthy application process. Often there is an upfront bond or bank guarantee required. Just because a landlord will lease you the premises, it doesn't mean that you are allowed to conduct the type of business that you want from those premises. So, you know, what does that mean? Sign the lease agreement contingent on council approval. Okay, I mean, the landlord doesn't care if you don't get approved, so sign it contingent on. In South Australia, a lease has to be 6 years long, but it can be broken up into blocks. So what does that mean? A lease might be 3 + 3. What that means, 3 years up front and then an option to renew for 3 years. So, you know, as a landlord, what do I want? I want a 6-year lease because I get certainty of rent for 6 years. As a tenant, what do I want? I want a 1-year lease because I want the option to dive out every year. If things go badly, I want the option to get out. So, you know, there are laws put in place that, you know, make the landlord, they're enforced to try and find someone else to take your lease over if you quit it. But, you know, you should be aware that, you know, releasing commercial premises can take a long time and you're pretty much liable for the rent until that happens. So as a rule of thumb, if you're going to lease for the general rule of thumb, if you're going to lease for 3 years plus 3 years, then they're probably going to want to offer, you're going to want to get 3 months of free rent. Okay, that's the price that the landlord pays for the longer lease. 6 years, 6 months free rent. Okay. Think about if you do have a fit out, what can be bundled up into the lease. So if something is going to improve the capital value of the property, you might say to the landlord, well, you pay for that and I'll pay for it indirectly through an extra $10 a week rent or something like that. Okay, so lease terms and conditions and payment plans can be quite flexible. If you're not sure about how to approach those sorts of things, come in here and talk to our business advisor, Rob Chisholm. He is a guru at that sort of stuff. And this is the last topic, which is good. The timing is good. It's cash flow. It's a bit of an accounting-y thing, but it's an important thing to understand. And the reason is that the majority of businesses that fail in Australia don't fail because they're not profitable. They fail because of cash flow problems. So what is cash flow? Money in and money out is cash flow. So if the money in is more than the money out, you've got positive cash flow. If the money out is more than the money in, you've got negative cash flow. So when you're starting up, generally, you'll be paying out a lot more money than you earn. So negative cash flow. Ideally, as time moves on, the money that you're getting in will exceed the money that's going out and you'll be in positive cash flow. Okay. So why is it important? It's important because the good example here is JobKeeper. when JobKeeper first came in, a lot of businesses couldn't work with JobKeeper because of the cash flow problems that it caused them. So if you're a cafe, you might bring in $15,000 in takings a week, but effectively pay most of that out in inventory costs and wages each week. So, and you rely on that. So it's almost like a hand to mouth thing. When JobKeeper first came in, those businesses were having to wait a month before they got their first JobKeeper payments. So effectively they had to cover a month's worth of JobKeeper payments before they got reimbursed from the government. And for a lot of businesses, they just didn't have that much money in the bank. Okay, so the cash flow didn't allow for 4 weeks of JobKeeper payments. So that's a good example of cash flow, okay, of a cash flow problem. And you know, for me, it's a problem in business because you know, most financial advisors in the business area will tell you that cash in the bank isn't cash, isn't money that's being used effectively. That you should be using that money to grow the business or to buy more inventory, or you know, to turn it over as quickly as possible. The trouble with that, of course, is that when you do have crises like those that we've seen recently, is you've got no buffer against it. So in my businesses, and perhaps it's my conservative personality, we've always had a good cash buffer in our bank accounts if the business is, you know, has allowed for it. So it means that, you know, hiccups like COVID haven't really affected us. But if you are running a real bare bones business where you're eking out the value of every cent, that you've almost virtually always got a zero bank balance, then problems like COVID are going to hit you pretty hard. So as part of her bookkeeping certificate, Bria remembers her lecture going on and on about monitoring cash flow. She's taking his advice on board and runs a monthly cash flow budget and compares it against her budget. In the middle of her first year of operations, she has a chance to buy a large amount of raw material at a significant discount. However, when she plugs those numbers into her budget spreadsheet, she realises it would leave her with a very low bank balance, low enough that she wouldn't be able to pay her rather large 12-month market stall fee. If she'd missed that payment, then she would almost give up half of her sales. So, you know, that's the sort of things that monitoring your cash flow can provide you. So thankful that she's mindful of her cash flow, she passes on the offer and continues to buy raw material in her usual quantities. So this is the cash flow template, and this is one that I have cheerfully stolen from Polaris, and it's the one that we use in our business. All it is a set of income and expenses down the left-hand side. I'll email you this tomorrow. You can just go through and change them to whatever suits your business. And what we do is at the beginning of the year, we go through and fill it in for the year. And let's say, for example, we've got marketing expenses, advertising expenses in there. That comes from our marketing plan. So, you know, we're going to have 3 campaigns during the year, you know, one in May, one in August, and one in December. And we'll increase the advertising costs up until those points, or perhaps we're going to run some trade shows. We'll add those things in there. And then each month we just go through and fill it in against the actuals and see how we're performing, about whether we need to change things for the rest of the year, just to make sure that we're going to cover everything. It doesn't take very long. Okay, it doesn't take very long. It's just having a good idea of where your money is and where it's going to go, and anticipating problems before they happen. It's not just a problem thing as well. You may identify an excess of cash flow in some areas that allow you to do some additional marketing, or perhaps buy some extra inventory at an extra discount or something like that. So there are pluses to this. So that's it. Good timing, 6:25. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to turn your microphone back on or turn your camera back on, and we can answer those questions. If you don't have any questions, then that's fine too. As I said, the Polaris Centre has business advisors here, and most people are eligible to sort of a free 30-minute session or a free 45-minute session if you just want to talk to someone. We also have paid mentoring and coaching programs. We also have our free marketing workshops and business workshops that we hold at regular intervals. So I do invite you to take part in those as well. All right. No worries, Jen. Get an email from me tomorrow. Yeah. So who was that?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go on, Angelina.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was so interesting, and it kind of really, went through the complexity of starting a small business. I wonder, can you also offer? Is there anything that we might be able to read that kind of gives us like that overview about how to really think about your idea itself? Whether the idea, because the case study that you had was nice. It was very like you could see how it worked, but I just wonder whether I don't know, some thought around something that we might be able to read that kind of brings that, really teases that out.
So there's no real boilerplate that's going to fit for everything, because sometimes it's financial limitations. Sometimes I said it's the laws of physics. Other times it's lack of expertise. It's really I think I don't know if you know what a SWOT analysis is. I think sometimes that is a really useful tool for those people who don't know what it is. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So, what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? So you draw them all up in a table and compare them with your competitors. So, and, a lot of the time it's compiling all that information and looking at it honestly. And if you can't look at it honestly, it's finding someone to sit down and look at it honestly with you. And I got to tell you, often that isn't your husband or your wife or your mum or your dad or your kids, because they'll tell you what you want to hear. Okay. And, a few times I've said that finding a mentor or a coach can be really useful. And often that's what they're most useful for, because, they've got no emotional attachment to you, and that they'll tell you, either tell you what you need to hear or lead you to make that decision yourself. Okay. So, yeah, I've never seen a template that is useful for feasibility studies. So are you willing to share what your idea is, Angelina?
Oh, no, look, so just so that I'm really clear about it, I'm in a higher ed, so I'm not. I used to do micro enterprise, and I was quite successful at that kind of really small level, and learned all the things that you were describing. The thing that really strikes me is that it's really hard to go from there to kind of viable small business, and so one of the things that I do from higher ed is try and think about how to bring that practice experience together with the theoretical stuff, and try and find a way of explaining it that is like that comes from that higher ed space. So for us, it's about trying to get the idea up and trying to get people involved and engaged in that whole idea validation process, rather than the pragmatics of actually getting the business running. Because that's why I'm here, because you can I've tried that several times from micro enterprise, and I find that really quite hard. So that's why I'm here listening to you. So I was just curious to know whether you were informed by, you were excited by different
scalability.
Talk about the idea stuff.
Yeah, scalability.
That's
something that I'm huge on is scalability.
Yeah,
it's what is the workload that one person can carry out. What profit can you generate from that activity, and can it scale? So I don't think that, and this is why I think, going back and looking at what your goals for the business are important, because, if your goal is just to produce income for yourself, often scalability doesn't matter. But if your scalability, if your goal is to have 20 employees and to be profitable, then scalability can't be avoided. Yeah. So, in our little, and this is the engineer in me, I'm always about how much can I wring from the stone that is me and my wife. So we're always looking at our processes, and before we even got started with the retail store, we looked at how long it took us to package things and rejigged all of our packaging processes, rejigged our postage processes, rejigged our online ordering processes. We created new software systems to deal with a lot of that. And, you know, as a consequence, our turnover is significantly higher per person than other people in our industry. And that was a deliberate choice on my behalf, just being a really terribly nerdy engineer. And, you know, sometimes I think that's the sort of approach that some people need to take. And, you know, the pizza box example, no scalability. I mean, that was what killed that. And, you know, there are a lot of small businesses out there that, you know, that have 5 employees that generate, you know, terrible profits because they're just not scalable, and they haven't, you know, realized or haven't made that hard decision. So
Thank you. That's actually really helpful. Thank you.
No worries, Angela. Thanks for asking the question. It's always nice to have a question. Does anyone else have any questions? No? Well, thank you everyone for coming along, and yeah, no worries, James. Thanks for taking part. As I said, I will email everyone a link to the recording tomorrow, a copy of the presentation, and the templates that we've discussed. If you've got any questions, then please contact me via phone or via email. I am at Polaris on Mondays and Tuesdays, and always happy to talk to anyone. All right. So thank you, everyone.